31. Grumpy Gordon. Harry Crow, A.N. As we enter a new year, this story also takes me into uncharted waters. This is the first time I've ever written Chapter 31, and also the first time a story of mine has broke the 200,000 words barrier. A big thank you to everyone who's kept me company on this journey, and there is still a long way to go. Chapter 31. The prophet being delivered that Sunday morning generated an effect seldom experienced in the great hall of Hogwarts. It slowly sank into silence, with not even the sounds generated by cutlery or crockery escaping this vacuum of hush. It's often said that nature abhors a vacuum, and this one never stood a chance of existing for more than a few seconds. The noise started like a babbling brook, soft and gentle, but soon turned into a raging torrent of white water that engulfed every table, including the staff. Sitting unmoved against this deluge, making them stand out like rocks jutting from the foaming water, the four friends were quietly finishing their breakfast. Bill would be here for their defense lesson in less than 15 minutes. An Order of Merlin, first class. Wow, Harry, just wow. I'm actually more excited about the scholarships, Roger, which was the only reason I agreed to this. My dad and mum laid their lives down for me that night, but all anyone ever talks about is the fact I didn't die. You didn't die yesterday, let's celebrate that. I understand what you're trying to say, Harry, but I wasn't hit with the killing curse yesterday. Ah, but here's the thing, Roger. How do you know I was? The only person to come out of that house alive was me, and no healer even checked me over until I ended up in Gringotts. Voldemort's wand was never found either, so who knows what happened that night. This had the entire Ravenclaw table held enthralled. No one had looked at the incident from that point of view before. A story appears in the prophet, and everyone just accepts that's what actually happened. We all saw at Halloween how wrong that newspaper can be. I was 15 months old and whisked away from that house by Rubeus Hagrid under Dumbledore's orders. Where was the investigation? Where was the process of law? Whatever Dumbledore says is just taken as truth, if not law. Yes, he's a powerful wizard, but he can get things wrong, just like everybody else. His girlfriend latched on to what Harry was actually saying here. It's Professor Binns all over again. No one questions what they're being told, so that becomes the accepted truth. People have been able to write what they like about that night, and no one can say whether they are right or wrong. Hermione knew Harry had memories of that night, but had no intention of mentioning that fact to anyone else. The arrival of Parvati saved Harry from having to answer any more questions on what happened that Halloween. She appeared rather upset at the news in the prophet. Weren't we supposed to be on holiday when it's your birthday? Does this mean the holiday plans have changed? Yes, we're juggling the schedule a bit to put us back in Britain for a couple of days. I thought you would be pleased, going to your first ball. The implications of what Harry just said were mind-blowing, but Parvati needed to hear the actual words coming from his mouth. There could be no mistakes made here. Are you saying what I think you're saying, Harry? I am the guest of honor and get my own table. All of the people going on holiday with us over the summer will be at that table. She looked questioningly toward her twin. You knew. We just found out yesterday. I owled home last night. Mum's going to be so excited. I owled my gran last night too. She probably wouldn't believe that story in the prophet if I didn't. Hermione was nodding her agreement with both their friends. It took a letter home for me. It should be some evening. Harry provided the final piece of information. Madam Bones was one of the ball organizers, so Susan should be getting an owl today too, telling her and Hannah of the new arrangements. Susan and Hannah came racing over, clutching a piece of parchment in her hand. Oh, I can't believe we're all going to the ball together. This will be brilliant. Parvati's mind had wandered in a different direction, though. The shopping voucher now makes sense. I'll be able to get a new dress. This saw Harry standing and shaking his head toward the Gryffindor witch. Sorry, Parvati, that voucher was for your birthday. This is a different item. We'll have to arrange another shopping trip for this. Parvati thought she was in heaven. A holiday, a ball, and now 2 shopping trips. Hermione, you're just gonna have to excuse me. With a squeal of delight, she leapt at Harry and practically hugged the life out of him, finishing with a kiss on the cheek just as Bill arrived. Harry, my teaching you defense doesn't seem to be doing much good. My humble apologies. Cursebreaker Weasley, I find there is no defense against a Pattle twin who wants a hug. Bill enjoyed the casual atmosphere they could adopt at the weekend, though knew he couldn't get Harry to just call him Bill. The Cursebreaker title was a mark of respect that, in Harry's eyes, he had earned. No goblin would disrespect that. He could still tease Harry back, though. And how are your defenses when it comes to hugs from girls called Granger? Sorry again, sir. I expect a T for that class. I just can't seem to get the hang of why I would want to defend against that. This set Bill off, laughing. Good answer, Harry. I only hope you're as good at dodging spells. As a special treat, we got hold of some training dummies that fire back. Should make today a lot more interesting. As long as they don't have swords or axes in their hands, that's fine with me. The weekends were Padma's favorite lessons. Having fun while learning suited her personality so much better. Girls, Hermione had a great idea about dresses. Why don't we have lunch at the Hufflepuff table and talk about it? That way Harry and Neville won't be forced to listen. Her twins' thoughts again went in a different direction. Do we need dates for this ball? It was left to Harry to break the only bit of bad news. Sorry, girls, there isn't any room at the table for more people. So we need to share you and Neville. That was never going to work, and Padma quickly marked everyone's dance cards. Sorry, sis. Neville has already asked me to be his date. I'm also pretty sure Hermione is not the kind of witch who shares. Well, at least not Harry. This comment drew laughter from Susan and Hannah, with no denials coming from Hermione or Harry. Bill marching the four away may have stopped the conversation, but this would be the main topic inside Hogwarts until the exams hit. Parvati raced back to the Gryffindor table, desperate to tell her news to Lavender. Dumbledore was certainly not pleased at the prophet's news. Fudge appeared to be succeeding where he had failed so spectacularly. How the hell did that happen? Turned his ire in the direction of his deputy. Minerva, as headmaster, I demand to be kept appraised of all the details of this scholarship. His deputy was having none of it. Sorry, headmaster, you are neither on the scholarship board of trustees nor require the information on any educational grounds I can perceive. Just what are your reasons for demanding this information? Damn it, Minerva, I'm the headmaster. I am aware of that, though still don't see the reason behind this demand. You haven't concerned yourself with the new first-year intake for almost 40 years. Why the sudden interest now? This scholarship could be a powerful force for good, but we need to ensure that the right people are chosen. We will ensure that the right children are chosen. Amelia, Sirius, and I might have a different definition of right than you do, but I'm learning this is not necessarily a bad thing. If you would like to make a formal complaint, I really don't know who you would direct it at. The trust is set in such a way that, to replace a trustee, you need the agreement of the other two. If you can convince Sirius and Amelia to replace me with yourself, you'll deserve your place on the trust board. Lord Black will be in the castle today as usual. I can only suggest you mention it to him. Albus was taken aback at this information. There is no other involvement, no goblin input. No, why should there be? Amelia represents the ministry. I'm there as Hogwarts' voice, while Sirius speaks for the Potters, until Harry is old enough to replace his godfather. The only request made was from Harry himself. He wants one of the students chosen each year to be a muggle born like his mother. We all agreed to that. Dumbledore didn't agree, but then his opinion was neither asked for nor apparently counted for much when he gave it. He decided to keep his own counsel and wait for a better opportunity to try and let his specific thoughts on the matter be known. At the moment, there was such a groundswell of support for this measure that to speak against it would see him swept aside. Severus appeared at his side and slapped his copy of the Prophet onto the table. Leaning in so only the headmaster could hear, Severus made his feelings known. Still think I'm overreacting. I would be publicly flogged before my soul was a Dementor's lunch, and that would be just the ministry's response. Severus strode out of the hall, taking Dumbledore's appetite with him. Uo Sirius entered the great hall and stopped dead in his tracks. His eyes had immediately traveled to where his godson usually sat, and soon locked on to Harry. What had stopped Sirius was the fact that Hermione wasn't there. It took him a moment to spot her sitting at the Hufflepuff table. That she was smiling and chatting animatedly with their friends eased Sirius' fears. He didn't know how these two would handle their first fight. He was certain, though, that neither of them would be smiling. He approached Harry and Neville, deciding to play dumb. Hey, you two, where are the girls? Hi, Sirius. They're over at the Hufflepuff table, chatting with the other three about dresses for the ball. They thankfully spared Neville and me that torture. This blew the last remaining fears that they'd had a falling out clear away. Sirius also had something to add to that conversation. Your father has offered the goblin tailors to make all our outfits for the ball, since they made the original that inspired this idea. Neville was immediately shaking his head. I had to tell Parvati about the birthday party. You're on your own for this one, mate. And here was me thinking a Longbottom had my back. Hey, if it wasn't for Padma, I would be dreading this ball. Witches can be really scary. Just go over there. You know Hermione won't let anything bad happen to her boyfriend. Thanks a bunch, Neville. Sirius was trying not to laugh as he watched Harry stroll over to the 5 girls. His girlfriend was the first to spot his approach. Does Sirius want us to start early? I thought we had another 10 minutes. No, Hermione. He brought some news from my father. He's offering the goblin tailors to make all your dresses. For the second time today, Harry had a witch screaming with joy before engulfing him in a bone-crushing hug. There were no complaints this time, though as Hermione was the one doing the screaming/hugging. They had kept any public displays of affection to hand-holding, so the kiss that followed the hug would again set tongues wagging. Not that it was much more than a peck on the lips. It was just the first time they had seen this couple kiss in public. Hermione, though, was too excited to care. That's fantastic. Harry solves all our problems. She then turned to their friends, trying to explain her excitement. The goblin tailors made my dress for Harry's Centurion ceremony. They are simply brilliant. I got to choose everything, and they were so nice. My dress also fitted like a second skin. They made Madame Malkin seem like an amateur. Her excitement instantly spread to their friends, though the option to hug Harry in thanks wasn't available to anyone else. Hermione still had him wrapped in her arms, proving Padma correct. Hermione wasn't about to share Harry with anyone. Witches and wizards, the length and breadth of Britain, rejoiced at this announcement, and then quickly began to plan how they could acquire tickets for the event of the year. The country's purebloods tended to fall into one of 3 categories, and their opinion on this momentous event depended on which faction they supported. The Light faction thought this recognition was long overdue, and couldn't wait to see their savior accept the country's highest award. Those witches and wizards of a neutral persuasion depended heavily on their abilities to read the political situation, so they could lean in that direct while maintaining their center stance. Since the ministry appeared to have jumped heavily into the light, that would be the direction they would lean, for now. None could see any reason not to support this event, so they would. Those with a darker disposition had been caught on the hop by the sudden shift in the ministry's position. Malfoy's exposure had left the minister with no other option but to distance himself and his ministry from Lucius Malfoy and his supporters. They had briefly rejoiced at Dumbledore's very public embarrassment before realizing that had pushed Fudge, the one place they feared, right into the capable arms of Amelia Bones. The head of the DMLE was tough, resourceful, and very bright. That she had lost all but one of her entire family to Death Eater attacks meant there would be no forgiveness to be found there. With Malfoy and Dumbledore expressing contradictory opinions on every subject, Cornelius Fudge had usually given the impression that he didn't know what day of the week it was not anymore. The ministry now had a clear direction, and it wasn't in their favor. At this moment in time, to publicly fight against this change in the tide would be politically and socially suicidal. They would have to bide their time and slowly try to reverse the current back in their direction. Most would openly support this event and even attempt to acquire tickets, just not try too hard. Minerva was trying hard to understand the resistance against her choice for a Potter scholarship. She had spent the best part of a fortnight going over every new student's file, and this child jumped out at her at every turn as a deserving candidate. She was left unsure what criterion the other 2 were working with, but was determined to get to the bottom of this. Ginevra will be the 7th child Marley and Arthur will have sent to Hogwarts, and September will see 5 Weasley children attending the castle at the same time. They are also as light a family as it's possible to find, and their eldest son has been tutoring Harry and his friends for most of the term. In all of our new first year, I can't see a more deserving case for a Potter scholarship than this. That she is also a pureblood will balance nicely with the muggle-born we've already chosen. If you have another reason for rejecting this candidate, then I think I'm entitled to hear it. It was left to Amelia to try and calm her old friend's fears. We agree with everything you've just said, Minerva, but there is specific information we can't divulge just yet. Can I say that good things are planned for Arthur at the Ministry? Things that will certainly ease any financial worries the Weasley family might have. These planned changes could leave our choice of Ginevra then open to question, something I don't think we can afford, especially in the scholarship's inaugural year. This information is very sensitive, but will certainly be made public before the summer ball. It will all drop into place then, and you will see we are right. She was racking her brains for a hint of what these planned changes could be, especially since Sirius appeared to be aware of them, and Minerva could only come up with one thing: it had to involve Harry. Deciding it was pointless to pursue this any longer, and knowing Amelia wouldn't lie to her, Minerva conceded her argument. Very well then, remove the financial hardship, and there remains no grounds to support that candidate. The which you both chose would have been my second choice, so I will happily support her as the other Potter Scholarship student. I shall also be studying the prophet closely for Arthur Weasley's good news. This drew a relieved chuckle from Amelia. Believe me, Minerva, you won't have to look for the news. It will be blazed right across the front page. Sirius wanted to know who got to tell Harry, with Minerva asking for that honor. Harry said he wanted this to be like an extended family. I wanted to have a chat with him and see just how far he wants to take that. I will be arranging a visit to Diagon Alley. He may want to meet with them before September 1st. That's a brilliant idea, Minerva, but we will be out of the country for most of the summer. Arranging it near the end of the holidays would work. They could all do their school shopping together. Ooh-oh. He could see she was troubled. The signs were hard to miss. Nervously chewing on the end of her quill while neither turning the page of her book nor writing any notes, Hermione had been deep in thought for the last 10 minutes. Since the four friends were currently in the library, revising for exams, Harry had to keep his voice to barely above a whisper. Hermione, if you don't tell us what's bothering you, we won't be able to help. Getting caught wool-gathering actually made her blush. It was also scary sometimes how well Harry could read her mood. Sorry, guys, was revising some stuff from earlier in the term and my mind just wandered. To be honest, I was struggling to believe some of the things that's happened to us. I mean, we're only first years. Seeing where this was leading, Harry tried to point her in the right direction. Why are we sitting here revising for our exams? The answer to that was obvious, and Hermione didn't disappoint. So we can get good marks in our exams. It's important that we study and do well. Harry had another easy question for her. So, you would expect the four of us to perform better than, say, Ron Weasley? This very suggestion appeared to light a fire under Hermione. Considering he does the bare minimum to get by, and none of us have ever seen him studying, that would have to be yes. He seems the type who will grab his books the night before the exam, and there's always the chance that the right questions might come up for him. I would still expect the four of us to get higher marks, though. What are you getting at, Harry? What you're saying is that we'll be prepared, while Ron Weasley has to hope for a large slice of luck to do well. Since that summed up Hermione's thoughts, she nodded in confirmation. Padma and Neville were also listening intently, curious to see where this was going. Well, I think what you have to consider is that I've been prepared and also been aided by massive slices of luck. There was no chance Harry was going to get away without explaining that comment. I walked into Hogwarts as a goblin warrior, a warrior who had been training and being briefed for this mission for years. Discounting Master Flitwick, and now Henrika, Hermione knows more about the Goblin Nation than the rest of the staff put together. But Harry, I've barely scratched the surface. I know, but none of them have even bothered to learn that much. Let's take the sorting as an example. You three now know me. What would you expect me to do in that situation? It was Padma who was first in with an answer, beginning to glimpse what Harry was trying to say. You would never renounce being a goblin, and certainly not because of a situation Dumbledore forced you into. Neville and Hermione agreed totally with that assessment, gaining a smile from Harry. We had the chances of Dumbledore pulling something like that around the 20% mark. There was even a concern he wouldn't let me leave and confine me to the castle. Hermione's hand shot into his at that declaration, offering comfort as Neville asked the question. What would you have done then? I have a way of sending my father a short-coded message that we save for emergencies. Gringotts would have shut its doors until I was released. Meanwhile, Hermione and I would have been doing our best to escape. Once outside the wards, we would portkey to Gringotts. She didn't know what it was about being included in his escape plans, but Hermione was sitting with a wide grin on her face. So you see, I was well prepared, but then also handed a massive slice of luck by Hogwarts declaring I was her champion. The duel with Master Sharpshard also comes to mind. We all know he could take me in under 2 minutes. Instead, my Centurion armor makes me faster and stronger while being able to cast with both blades is a massive advantage. Even so, it was Hogwarts who finally tipped the balance. She hindered and obstructed Master Sharpshard at every opportunity while keeping my path clear. Padma and Neville were both sure what had swung that fight in Harry's favor. Kicking Hermione had enraged their friend beyond anything either had ever seen. Hermione herself was beginning to see the point Harry was making. So you're saying that preparation, along with luck, has got you ahead all year. That was pretty close to what Harry was trying to say. The headmaster didn't bother to do his homework and has found himself on the back foot since the 1st of September. We studied every move he's ever made and had a full profile of Dumbledore that was constantly being updated. I don't know if it's his arrogance that he couldn't possibly be wrong, or if he didn't want anyone to know I was at Gringotts. Master Flitwick sits at the same table and would have been a mine of information on goblins. The headmaster had that resource at his fingertips and never used it. He keeps treating me like a wizard, with even Snape seeming to learn that doesn't work. Does that answer your questions? It was now a blushing Hermione who nodded, before going back to her revising. She could hear Padma sniggering in amusement and was trying to ignore it. The discovery that Snape was responsible for passing the prophecy on to Voldemort had kicked Harry's animosity against Dumbledore to a whole different level. Hermione just hoped they could reach the holidays without a confrontation. She should have known better. Minerva really couldn't exclude Albus from this demonstration, not with the examiners arriving in the castle earlier than usual. With Harry once more all over the prophet, Griselda had maneuvered to get the rest of the examiners into Hogwarts when the interest was at its peak. All she'd needed to mention was that Minerva wanted their opinion on the Boy Who Lived's class, and her fellow examiners couldn't wait to set off for the castle. Harry was having to perform boyfriend duties and try to talk Hermione down from the funk she was getting herself into. The older Ravenclaws had recognized most of the examiners and wondered why they were in the castle early, sparking Hermione's funk. Our exams don't start until Monday, Hermione. You don't get those examiners until our owl year. Professor McGonagall told us they might be coming to see our class. It will just be the same as last time. A chance to help put her friend's mind onto something else, while teasing was not something to be dismissed lightly. Padma just couldn't resist. Oh, Hermione, I wonder if any of the other girls will take Harry up on his offer to pet his dragon. Catching the double meaning her friend was hinting at, Hermione knew exactly how to stop this stone dead. As long as they remember I know the goblin command for bite their hands off, I don't see there being any problems, do you? She wasn't sure whether it was the look in Hermione's eyes or the tone of her voice, but something sent a shiver up Padma's back. Merlin, Hermione, you can be one scary witch when you want to be. Are you sure you're not part goblin? Saying that to any other witch would be considered a severe insult, but Padma knew Hermione would take it the spirit it was offered, as a compliment. Why, thank you, Padma. That's the second time someone has said that recently. Harry must be rubbing off on me. It was only after spotting Harry's wide-eyed expression that Hermione realized what she had said, that, and the sniggering traveling up and down the Ravenclaw table. Padma put her arm comfortingly around Hermione's shoulders. Ignore the plebs, Hermione. We knew what you meant. I think saying that Harry's had an influence on all of us is certainly a better way of putting it, though. She could feel her friend's shoulders shaking. It was only when Hermione couldn't hold her laughter in any longer that Padma realized she wasn't upset. Hermione, laughing at her slip of the tongue, just confirmed what Padma had said. Harry was certainly influencing all of them. The transfiguration lesson went pretty much the same as last time, with Padma having her bluff called and stroking the dragon with a trembling hand. The examiners looked pleased, all except one. There is always one. The students had noticed him at once. He could hardly be missed. This wizard was well over 6 feet tall, yet would have trouble tipping the scales over 10 stone when he was soaking wet. This despite having a snout that could have been a model for the dipping nose Cone the engineers designed for Concord. Wearing a frown since before he stepped in the door, this was one long streak of misery. Gordon McPhee had been saddled with the nickname Grumpy Gordon when he attended Hogwarts. Moaning McPhee was also suggested, but Myrtle had kinda got the moaning name tag all sewn up. The ghost really had no peer in the moaning stakes when she was on her game. Grumpy Gordon was a nickname that stuck even to the present day, probably because it was so apt. I fail to see why we should change centuries of history because one class wants to do things differently. Our current method of transfiguration was painstakingly developed by our forefathers. One class a week for 9 months, and suddenly we want to throw all that away. Albus was appalled at what he had witnessed in this classroom. This new form of transfiguration had the potential to trigger massive changes in magical Britain over a very short period of time, something that in his opinion was to be avoided at all costs. I'm afraid I must agree with some of the fine points Mr. McPhee has raised. I saw no notes being taken, nor homework issued, far less a textbook being used for reference. What textbooks would you put on the list for next year? Are there even textbooks available? Gordon seized on this to further his argument. Exactly my point, headmaster. We have books written by recognized masters on the subject that we would be consigning to the rubbish heap. No textbooks, no notes, and no homework. Why do we need a transfiguration master teaching a class when the skills she spent many years learning clearly aren't required? Minerva was ready to go to war, but Griselda interrupted before the enraged transfiguration professor could say anything, far less draw her wand. Perhaps we could ask Mr. Crow if there are any books on this method of transfiguration. The entire class were hanging on every word spoken. To most of the students, this was their favorite class. Even Ron Weasley would cast his vote for this new method of transfiguration. With no notes to take, books to read, or homework to be done, this was easily his favorite class. That he had completed the entire first-year curriculum by the end of January was immaterial to Ron. No one wanted a return to the more traditional method of teaching transfiguration. It's Centurion Crow, ma'am, and sorry, but the only written material on transfiguration is purely introductory. The class were then left wondering if Snape had based his nasty demeanor on his favorite examiner. There were certainly startling similarities in the sarcastic delivery. Did you really expect them to have books? Please. With Dumbledore already in the classroom, the last thing Harry needed was a reminder of Snape. Everyone in the class who really knew Harry winced at his answer to this examiner, an examiner who reminded the muggle-borns of the great Gonzo from the Muppet Show. Excuse me, sir. The goblins had a written language and were experimenting with printing while people on this island were huddled over pieces of shredded bark, trying to get a spark by striking 2 lumps of flint together. The goblins have had the written word as long as man has had fire. This silenced the entire class, but Harry was just getting warmed up. I realize that there are people in this room desperate to call me a liar, and that's okay. Just because you think I'm full of dragon shite still doesn't make your views on any of these matters right. Dumbledore then tried to play mediator, which was certainly the wrong person doing entirely the wrong thing where Harry was concerned. Harry, my boy, can I offer a piece of friendly advice? These people standing here hold your future in their hands. It might not be wise to antagonize them. Harry cut right across the headmaster, which is why we had a history exam that was the laughing stock of Europe. I'll save these witches and wizards the trouble of remembering me for future reference. I won't be sitting any OWL. There was now lack of noise and movement, as that comment froze everyone. Well, not quite. Hermione's hand again shot into Harry's under the desk. He held his girlfriend's hand before offering a comforting squeeze to let her know he was still in control. Albus was so shocked it was left to Griselda to break the silence. Centurion Crow, if you have no intention of sitting OWLs, and presumably NEWTS, could you tell us why you are here? That's easy, ma'am. I'm at Hogwarts for an education. Grumpy Gordon thought he had his opportunity. Without exam passes, you're nothing, boy. The ministry can legally snap your wand. The thunk made the entire class jump, all except Hermione, who'd seen Harry draw his knife and slam it point first into the desk. I don't have a wand to break. Even Dumbledore's pet, half-giant, couldn't snap that, not without slicing his fingers clean off. Might stop him illegally lifting any more toddlers out their cribs. McGonagall's Harry, combined with Hermione squeezing his hand hard enough to stop blood flow, drew Harry back. He had no intention of backing down, though, just curtailing his temper. Mr. McPhee hinted that this class doesn't need Professor McGonagall. I'll say it out loud that Hogwarts doesn't need Mr. McPhee. Professor McGonagall has been teaching her NEWT class for 7 years and knows her students' capabilities in transfiguration better than anyone on this planet. Why should a stranger then come into the school, meet that student for about 15 minutes, and then they get to award a grade that affects that student for the rest of their life? Minerva could see Harry getting agitated at the slight to the goblins, but couldn't understand why he was already refusing to sit exams. We need to be seen to be impartial, Harry. That is why we have examiners from the ministry. I trust your opinion, Professor, rather than that of an outsider. When Master Pitsley thinks I've reached apprenticeship level, he will tell me. I will then have to decide if he would take me on to become a master, or whether my future lies elsewhere. No goblin needs a slip of paper to say how far they took their education. Our system has no such exams. Since I'm attending Hogwarts as a goblin, I have no need of them. Harry was rubbing his thumb along the back of Hermione's held hand, drawing as much comfort from this action as his girlfriend was. He needed it as Dumbledore once more entered the verbal fray. The old wizard just didn't know when to shut his mouth. Harry, my boy, you're taking a decision here that will affect the rest of your life, a decision that doesn't need to be made for another 4 years. I would ask you to reconsider that decision. Why? Is your new plan to send Tom Riddle my OWL results and hope he dies of shame that a goblin beat his scores? I have to say it's defiantly an improvement on your power of love suggestion. I still only kiss Hermione. Hermione wasn't in the least embarrassed. She was watching how close Harry's hand stayed to his knife that was still sticking out the desk. She moved their joined hands until they were next to her sword hilt. Harry gave a slight smile at this, but Dumbledore wouldn't let it go. If you don't sit your exams, you could potentially find yourself wanting to stay in the wizarding world and being unable to do so. Harry's loud laughter cut Dumbledore off, leaving half the class thinking he'd finally lost it. It took Harry a moment to regain control before he could answer. Sorry, Hermione, but that was funnier than any of those comedy tapes you showed Padma and me over the holidays. He then turned his attention back to Dumbledore. If I decide to stay in the wizarding community, I shall be Lord Harry James Potter, Order of Merlin, First Class. Do you honestly think people will care whether I sat my OWLs or not? Your mother and father would want you to. Dumbledore never got to say any more. Harry was on his feet with his knife yanked out the desk and now pointed between the headmaster's eyes. My father will agree with my decision, believing it is mine to make. As to my mum and dad, I'll never know since they're both gone. It's looking more and more likely you had a hand in it too. Remember my promise, old man. If we get proof, then I'll be coming for you. Hermione noticed Harry's armor had begun to creep down his wrists, though his knife never wavered. She was certainly not the only one who was relieved to hear the bell ringing. Minerva actually stood in front of Albus before speaking. Class dismissed. Centurion, a moment of your time outside, please. Harry nodded before heading outside with the rest of the class. The instant her last student left the classroom, Minerva spun on Dumbledore. You just couldn't let it go, could you? Always thinking you know best and trying to push that view down other people's throats. Is it any wonder you're barred from going anywhere near Harry? You lose me my 2 best students, and I might just follow them out the door. I'll tell you this, Albus Dumbledore. If you had anything to do with Lily and James' murder, I'll kill you myself. The examiners all stood there, shocked and stunned. Every member of the British magical community had laid eyes on the picture of a golden boy who lived, standing over a bleeding Dumbledore. All the examiners had thought they were about to witness the live version. Albus had been playing down any talk of tension in his school. His deputy just backed Crow and threatened to kill the headmaster if the boy's claims could be proven. Griselda was thinking if that crime could be proven, the wizarding public would do the job before Minerva could get her wand on Dumbledore. This ball would confirm James and Lily Potter as 2 heroes of their country. If Albus was involved in their murder, there would be hell to pay. Gordon couldn't believe what he just witnessed. His speciality was defense, so he had been focused on the boy's eyes. What he saw there sent a shiver of fear up his spine. This boy was squaring up to Albus Dumbledore, yet there had been no fear in his eyes, and it certainly wasn't a case of bravado either. There was a determination expressed there that Gordon expected to see in a few of the better NEWT candidates, very occasionally an exceptional OWL student, certainly not in someone finishing their first year at Hogwarts. He also couldn't help notice the other 3 students who were obviously ready to spring to his aid. Just what was going on here? Albus was wondering the exact same thing, and also wondering how that could have gone any worse. When Cornelius discovered Harry wasn't going to be sitting any OWL, he would hit the roof. When it became known that Albus Dumbledore was responsible for this revelation, and he was sure Minerva was going to put the blame on him, Albus wondered if he might not be barred from the ministry too. The 3 friends had waited along the corridor for Harry, with Hermione racing to him the instant McGonagall returned to her class. "Hey, I'm fine. Sorry about that, but can we cancel revision tonight?" They had all caught up with each other now, leaving Padma free to answer. "Sure, Harry." "You got detention with McGonagall." "What? No. I just want the time to tell you all what's going on. Can't have my friends thinking I'm turning into a right nutter. The rest of the school can think what it likes." Hermione was back on Harry's arm as the 4 friends headed off to lunch. She actually stopped a moment at Harry's answer. "What did McGonagall want with you then?" "Oh, she wanted to put a word in for Hagrid. She claims he's a rather simple soul who would jump in the lake and wrestle the giant squid if Dumbledore asked him to. Sirius actually agrees with that assessment, but he can't forgive Hagrid either. Hagrid may have been blindly following Dumbledore's orders, but he knew Sirius was my godfather, so he must have known that's where I was supposed to go." This had Hermione shaking her head in disbelief. In the armed forces, if you're given an order that's unlawful, the "I was following orders" defense doesn't apply. I don't know how that works when a headmaster is giving the orders to a groundskeeper. "Oh, McGonagall also wanted a word about the Potter scholarships. They've made their choices and needed to know if I was going to meet the 2 students beforehand. She suggested meeting in Diagon Alley, and then we could all do our shopping together." Sirius and Amelia both knew our summer schedule, so McGonagall had already picked a date. She knew we'd be available. "That's a brilliant idea, Harry. I wish I'd known someone on the train last year. Sitting with friends on the express at Christmas was so much better than being alone and terrified on the 1st of September. This drew a big smile from Hermione as she too cast her mind back. "I agree that's a brilliant idea, Neville. But I met Harry on the train, so I can't really complain." "Did McGonagall tell you anything about them, Harry?" He nodded before answering. "One is a muggle-born wizard who's going to be the first in his family, but not the last. He has a younger brother and sister, and both of them are magical. His name is Colin Creevey, and his dad is a milkman." "Hermione, what's a milkman?" She thought of the best way of explaining this that her friends would understand. "You know how at my house we can phone, and the takeaway gets delivered? Well, Colin's dad delivers milk." Padma was still struggling to get her head around this phone, and it will be delivered to your door concept, even after seeing it in action multiple times. So you phone, and his dad rushes to your door with some milk. The old Hermione would have went into great detail about dairies, milk floats, and regular rounds, and they would all have missed lunch by the time she was finished. "Something like that, Padma. Who got the other scholarship, Harry?" "A young girl who is an only child and lost her mother a year or so back. Her name's Luna Lovegood, and I got the impression McGonagall was really hoping we would take her under our wings." Padma grabbed Neville by the arm as they increased their pace toward the Great Hall. "Well, whether they know it or not, those 2 just found themselves with 4 new friends. Now let's get to lunch. Watching Harry scare the adults always gives me an appetite, and we've got our normal defense class next." The 4 friends made their way to lunch. The quartet weren't the only ones that noticed neither Dumbledore nor McGonagall made it down. Thanks for reading, and happy Hogmanay. 32. Offers abound. Harry Crow disclaimer. I do not own Harry Potter, and write here purely for my own pleasure. I am constantly amazed that people appear to enjoy these efforts, and can only offer my thanks to those who take the time to read them. Chapter 32. After dinner, the 4 friends headed up to the 7th floor. Harry didn't want there to be any way this conversation could be overheard. He also appreciated Hermione waiting until now to discover why he'd suddenly announced to all of first year he had no intention of sitting his OWLs, even though she was obviously desperate to know. Hogwarts provided the quartet with a cozy room that held a couple of sofas facing each other. Harry and Hermione slipped into one, leaving Neville and Padma to occupy the second. Taking a deep breath, Harry began to tell his friends why he'd asked them here. Padma, Neville, there are things going on behind the scenes you need to know about. I'm sorry that I can't tell you everything, but I think you deserve to know what might affect the four of us. Neville, this is going to be hard to hear, mate. It's only certain things we've just discovered that have me telling you this now. Padma shifted closer to her friend. The way Harry was talking, Neville would soon need any comfort she could offer. We have to go back before we were born to discover where all our troubles started. They began with a prophecy that links me to Voldemort. You see, until Voldemort visited Godric's Hollow that Halloween, the prophecy could have applied to one of two boys, Harry Potter or Neville Longbottom. This was a revelation not even Hermione had heard before. It shocked the three listeners as Harry continued. It wasn't until Voldemort cast his spell at me that I became the child of the prophecy. Had he chosen to visit the Longbottoms first, Neville could have been saddled with being the boy who lived, and I would be the one visiting my mum and dad in St. Mungo's. Those Death Eaters knew about the prophecy. With the Potters dead, they went after the Longbottoms, looking for some answers. Both wizards now found themselves being comforted by the witch sitting next to them. Telling the story was affecting Harry nearly as much as Neville hearing it. We knew the prophecy was made to Dumbledore, and assumed Sirius had told Voldemort about it, while betraying my mum and dad. When we found out Sirius was innocent, my father began an investigation into the people who were responsible for an innocent man being sent to Azkaban. That's when we discovered what Crouch was up to and got Sirius free. The investigation didn't stop there, though, and has just provided us with the name of the Death Eater who told the prophecy to Voldemort. It was Snape. It was only Padma's arm around Neville that stopped him springing to his feet. He looked to Harry, hoping this horror story wasn't real. Harry, why is Snape still walking around Hogwarts? Believe me, Neville, I so want to hack the bastard to pieces. The problem is Dumbledore. He knows what Snape did and has been protecting him all these years. This proved a revelation too far for Padma. She spat out a string of words that they assumed to be Hindi before reverting to English. How could that doddering old arse be stupid enough to keep Snape in the school with you two at Hogwarts? If it wasn't for Master Pitsley, both of you would even be in his class. That's just sick. Neville was having a revelation of his own. Harry's outburst in class now made perfect sense. You think Dumbledore gave that information to Snape so he would pass it on to Voldemort? It's the only thing that makes any sense because I know how much I want to attack that greasy bastard. For you not to, there would need to be a very good reason. Harry was delighted to see how far his friend had progressed from the boy who was almost frightened of his own shadow. My father maneuvered Dumbledore into a position where he would reveal how Voldemort got to hear about the prophecy. The only problem is, Dumbledore has no idea he was set up and hasn't twigged we know about Snape. If we go after Snape, Dumbledore is bound to realize some of what's going on. There are things happening that should destroy any public credibility Dumbledore has left, and may even see him heading to Azkaban if we can provide enough information for the Ministry to go after him. There is a chance Snape may slip out the country before we can drop the shit onto Dumbledore. I think it's a chance we need to take. Given Dumbledore's track record, the odds of Snape being someone he manipulated to get what he wanted are better than even money. There was still something troubling Neville, though. I just can't work out why he would do that. What's in it for Dumbledore? Henrika spelt it out for us in history class, Neville. Voldemort and his Death Eaters were killing any and all opposition. The estimate at that time was the Ministry would fall by Christmas. Sirius told me our parents were very close, and also part of a group that opposed the Death Eaters. This group was led by Albus Dumbledore. The implications behind this hit Hermione hard. He would be able to manipulate situations to meet the terms of the prophecy. You told me your parents had defied Voldemort 3 times. Padma was on the exact same wavelength as her friend. And if he had Snape on the other side, he could pretty much do what he liked. Henrika tries to get us to look behind the facts of history. Can't you just see Dumbledore thinking the Potters and Longbottoms being wiped out was a fair price to pay for stopping Voldemort, especially since it was costing him nothing? The mental picture that Harry was painting was one that his friends had no trouble recognizing. Hermione had just put two and two together and hoped harder than she'd ever hoped for anything in her young life that the answer she was seeing was actually 327 anything but 4. Is this all a mission for Gringotts, Harry? Is that why you're not going to sit OWLs? Seeing the panic in her eyes, Harry took his girlfriend's hand in both of his. I came to Hogwarts as a goblin warrior. My mission was to promote goblin/wizard relations, with getting rid of Binns at the top of my list. Harry Crow's personal mission was to make friends and get some idea of where his place was in the world. When I spotted a young witch struggling to get her trunk onto the express, I thought here was someone else looking for a friend. I had watched you approach that group of Slytherin girls. I didn't hear what they said, but I'm certain it wouldn't be welcome to Hogwarts. Hermione leant into Harry, the panic in her eyes now replaced with an apology. After the troll in the infirmary, when I thought you and Padma wanted nothing more to do with me, I had decided not to return after Halloween. I was sure my father would have a replacement history teacher by then, just as I was sure there was nothing left for me at Hogwarts. I understand keeping secrets is bad, which is why I told the three of you as much as I could that lunchtime with my father. You three now know more about what's going on than officials at the ministry. Pulling her boyfriend toward her, Hermione then instigated their longest kiss to date. This kiss wasn't about passion, rather both confirming they hadn't lost something that was so important to the young couple, the fact that they were still a couple. I can say I'm sorry, Harry, but I thought it would be better if I showed you. I have been racking my brains all day to figure out why you would do the work and then not sit exams. With all this talk of manipulation, I added up the facts and came up with a totally stupid answer. The answer was so shocking, though, it actually stopped me thinking straight. Since the day we met, you have been as honest as you could with me. Harry now had a smile on his face, thinking that one day kissing Hermione might actually overtake hugging Hermione as his favorite thing in all the world. I'm sorry, too. The reasons I gave in class were the truth, but it was really something I should have talked over with you first, though, rather than just springing it on you along with everyone else. Dumbledore just makes me so mad that I announced my decision on the spur of the moment. I'll need to stay out of his way until the holidays. I could actually feel my armor slowly starting to slide over my body, getting ready for action. I didn't even know it could do that by itself. Padma had been ready to slap some sense into her friend. She thought they had been slowly breaking Hermione out of her habit of overthinking every situation. Hermione had then saved the situation by relying on her instincts and changing Harry's frown of disappointment into a goofy grin. We'll help you with staying out of Dumbledore's way. He's not someone I think any of us want to be around. Miss Granger, there may just have suffered a brain fart, but Neville and I never doubted you for a second. It was a blushing Hermione who tried to tease back, desperate to put her clangor behind her. I'll have you know, Miss Pattle, that young ladies do not suffer from flatulence of any kind. I will admit to having a moment worthy of Ronald Weasley. Her boyfriend interrupted before she could say any more. Thanks for that vote of confidence, guys. Hermione, please don't take this the wrong way. I would rather think my girlfriend suffered from the occasional brain fart than she was in any way comparable to Ronald Weasley. The kiss on the cheek that came with this comment confirmed to Hermione that Harry had forgiven his girlfriend's faux pas. For that, he could call it whatever the hell he wanted. Turning his attention to Neville, Harry again pushed the conversation into an uncomfortable area. I said you were the closest thing to family I had left, Neville. I still believe that. Because of this, there's something I want to ask. The next time you visit St. Mungo's, could I go too? I would really like to meet my godmother. Neville's head was now down, but he drew comfort from Padma's arms slipping back around him. This was a subject he found incredibly difficult to talk about, yet these were his friends. Harry even considered him family. She won't know you, Harry. She doesn't know me. We take her some sweets my gran says were Mum's favorite. She eats the sweet and then slips the wrapper into my hand. Gran says to throw them away, but I like to think of it as a present from my mum. I've kept every single one. I have them all carefully folded in a drawer in my bedroom. As he slowly and painfully told his story, they could all see the moisture gathering in Neville's eyes. To be honest, his three friends were suffering from the same condition. Neville, the goblin healers have a lot of experience with this curse. My father is going to offer their expertise to your gran when we meet over the holidays. They may not be able to do anything, but it couldn't hurt to try. The offer is being made because your mum is my godmother. Any steps toward good relations that come from this is purely a secondary benefit. Padma could practically feel the surge of hope that rushed through Neville. She agreed with Harry. There really was nothing to lose. His second comment prodded something that had been fermenting at the back of her mind. Padma decided just to ask her friend about what was troubling her. Harry, why are Gringotts pushing so hard for better relations with wizards? It goes against everything I've ever heard about goblins. Knowing they deserved the truth, Harry laid it out for them. The very pureblood policies that are slowly killing the magical community are having the same effect on Gringotts. It's all about maintaining power and bloodlines. You two are purebloods and will probably have betrothals negotiated for you. I understand in some families they are even considering cousins now as spouses. The betrothal comment added a green tinge to Neville's complexion, but Harry continued before anyone commented on it. They are so desperate to hold on to their power that every year, brilliant and talented witches and wizards are forced to leave Britain. This is simply because they don't possess the proper ancestry to be considered for decent jobs or as proper spouses. In a few weeks, the seventh years will graduate and discover that the bigotry in Hogwarts was only a sample of what they'll be faced with in magical Britain. These policies not only affect Hermione's future, but mine too. He turned toward his girlfriend. You've seen some of our city under Gringotts, and while it's large, that's all there is. In Britain, witches and wizards outnumber goblins by at least 10 to 1. Current ministry policy prohibits goblins living anywhere else but under Gringotts, causing us the same problems as you. Every year, more and more bright young goblins are deciding their future doesn't lie in pureblood-controlled Britain and are heading off to less restrictive countries. With an aging population and increasing numbers of younger goblins leaving, we're only a few generations away from serious population decline. Now perhaps you can see why we're pushing for this. Harry's story had them enthralled. We don't even know if this will work, but have to be able to show some progress to stand any chance of slowing the numbers leaving, putting even more pressure on the decision I've got to make about my future. Not all goblins will get behind this plan, though. We have our fair share of bigotry, too. There are those who, if Dursley had left me on their desk, would have fed me to a dragon and considered there being one less wizard in the world as a good place to start. This drew a yelp of fear from Hermione and saw her burrowing even closer into her boyfriend. My father is a very clever goblin. He saw the possibilities immediately. His original intention was simply for Harry Potter to turn up at Hogwarts and be sympathetic to goblin views. As I grew up, it was me who kept pushing for more. Extra tuition in history, economics, languages, anything to make my father proud of me and show him. And the nation, he was right to adopt a young wizard called Harry. Being awarded centurion status was way beyond anything we could have ever dreamed of. His attention was once more focused on Neville. Our healers were able to remove that fragment of Voldemort out of my head. The only solution the wizards have is to hit the container with a killing curse. This drew yelps from his three friends, but Harry was determined to get his point across. I'm not saying our healers are better, Neville, just different. Since there has been a lot of study into that curse, those differences just might be able to help your parents. Neville was holding on to the glimmer of hope this offered. Harry, I will talk to my gran about this, and you visiting. I think you're right. We really have nothing to lose. My father knows far more about this than I do. The two of them can chat about it when we're all on holiday. That feeling of having barely scratched the surface of goblin culture was back with a vengeance. Something Harry had now mentioned twice was niggling at Hermione, so she asked her boyfriend if he could explain it. Why have the goblins done a lot of research on that particular curse? Realizing that this would be something that could affect the Longbottom's final decision, Harry told his friends some information that had been conveniently forgotten by wizards. It's called the torture curse for a very specific reason. About 400 years ago, this vile thing was invented by the British Ministry of Magic for the sole purpose of torturing captured goblins. This was met by a trio of disbelieving stares. Goblins are pretty tough. Beating them up or breaking bones doesn't usually get you much information other than having your circumstances of birth questioned. The ministry had a war on their hands and needed information from their prisoners. Something new was needed. The curse was supposed to be kept secret. Not much chance of that happening in the ministry. It was only after the war was over that this particular curse was classed as an unforgivable, when wizards started using it on other wizards. Ministry law states that using this curse on a human being can see the caster get a life sentence in Azkaban. You do remember what ministerial department deals with goblins. All three friends were struggling to answer that without using the word barbaric. Hermione, though, had jumped to a different situation. Does that mean Lucius Malfoy could have cast the torture curse on you that day in defense class, and nothing would have been done? Technically, yes, though my knife would have been buried in his chest before Malfoy could cast. We're classed as dangerous beasts, Hermione. Is it any wonder goblins are leaving Britain? If Gringotts ever reach the stage where we have to bring in staff from abroad, it would be the beginning of the end. We would need to pay them a higher salary to compensate for the poor conditions in Britain, meaning the bank would have to charge its customers more. Our only alternative would be to close Gringotts. Either way, there are no winners. Padma checked her watch and got a surprise. Guys, we've been chatting for ages. If we don't get a move on, we'll miss curfew. They were heading back to their dorms, and Neville was enjoying Padma holding his arm. She'd been there for him tonight when he needed a friend. Harry's words from earlier struck another chord, and Neville didn't want Padma's hand on his arm replaced by that of a stranger his gran picked out. Can we extend our dating deal to include betrothals? If our families see us close, then maybe they won't start negotiations with people we don't know. It was a shocked Padma who had to clarify what her friend just said. Are you sure, Neville? I would hate to think I was taking advantage of you. We're friends and have a lot of fun together. You would be doing me a favor. Some of those girls scare the life out of me. I'm not talking about becoming boyfriend and girlfriend, just being good friends and looking out for one another. If you get a boyfriend, I would be fine with that. Padma knew Neville Longbottom would be considered quite the catch. He was also someone she really liked, and was delighted he wasn't looking to be her boyfriend yet. I can live with that, though I think it's you who'll get a girlfriend first. Neville just smiled with relief, giving Padma a friendly hug before saying good night to his friends and entering Gryffindor. The three Ravenclaws headed for their own house, with Hermione nervously asking Harry if they were okay. A misunderstanding that we talked out. We're fine, Hermione. I knew what not knowing why I wasn't going to sit those exams must be doing to you. I should have spoken to you earlier. I was just so busy trying to figure out how much I could tell Padma and Neville. Sorry, too, about the history lesson that turned into. With Neville safely tucked up in Gryffindor, Padma could now focus her attention on the Ravenclaw couple. She'd been surprised and delighted at how open Harry had been tonight. Even Neville had crawled out of that shell of his a little more. Oh, don't be daft, Harry. Apologizing to Hermione for extra lessons. You put a lot of trust in us tonight and offered Neville some hope. I'll spare you another paddle sister jumping you for a hug and just say thank you for that. The three friends made curfew with mere minutes to spare. Uo Gordon had heard fanciful tales of this special room inside Hogwarts, watching those four leave breakfast and head off for the second morning. That weekend had him determined to investigate. His patchy information led him to this seventh-floor corridor, where he made straight for the only door that was available. Upon entering, he couldn't have began to describe what the room looked like, probably because Gordon couldn't take his eyes off the boy. Harry had a metallic shield over his left forearm, and that knife of his held in that same hand. This was because he was wielding the sword of Gryffindor in his right hand. A kilt would have dated him back when the Highlanders fought the English Redcoats, though the Redcoats never fired spells at their enemies. The boy was fighting two dueling dummies. These were the top-of-the-range versions that actually fought back. His three friends were cheering him on while the red-headed tutor studied a stopwatch. Time. This led to much cheering before they noticed Gordon. Harry's smile vanished as he made his way to confront his uninvited and unwelcome visitor. Can we help you, Mr. McPhee? Gordon couldn't miss that neither sword nor knife were returned to their sheaths. The boy was ready for battle. When I heard you received extra tutoring in defense, I was naturally curious. My father pays for private tutoring in defense, and that's exactly what it is, private. I would like you to leave now. Not believing the cheek of this brat, Gordon addressed himself directly to Bill. Do you allow your students to talk to ministry officials like this? I work for Gringotts, not the ministry or Hogwarts. My job here is to teach these four to fight. You are disrupting my lesson. Gordon focused once more on the boy. He come here for information and intended to get it, one way or another. If you've been trained to fight, let's see you throw me out this room. This would at least provide Gordon with a measure of this boy's capabilities. The idea that he could be forcibly ejected from the room never even crossed the examiner's mind. He was looking forward to wiping the smirk of this brat's face. Okay, sir, goodbye. Gordon thought he was ready for anything, but the boy turning his back and returning to his friends caught him by surprise. A stinging hex to his arse should enrage the brat enough to fight. That was when the second surprise kicked in. The examiner couldn't move a muscle, as vines suddenly had him tied like a joint of butchered beef. His feet then left the floor as he shot toward the door. Gordon hadn't seen the boy cast a spell, yet here he was, flying through the open door and smacking straight into the tapestry that was hanging in the corridor. His bindings may have vanished, but it still took a moment to untangle himself from the tapestry and get his bearings. What was throwing those bearings off was the lack of a door he'd just been thrown through. None of his diagnostic spells returned any evidence of a room existing, a room he'd been standing in moments before. He was going to be in the castle until Friday and would be keeping a close eye on those four. His report to Dolars would certainly make interesting reading, though he now agreed with her this boy was a threat to their way of life. Sorry about that. Guys, Hogwarts will make sure we're not disturbed again. Just as well we were running defense drills, and you weren't firing curses from your sword. How did it feel holding both weapons and your shield? Bill was pleased to see the honesty once more shine through in Harry's answer. It felt slightly awkward, but I think that's more because this is an attacking configuration, and I wasn't allowed to attack. Using two blades that can cast spells proved successful against Master Sharpshard, but it would leave me too open against multiple opponents, especially if they had wands. That's why I wanted to add my shield. Can I try it again, where I can fight back? Bill nodded and started his stopwatch. What they saw next threw any concept of time out the door quicker than Hogwarts had got rid of McPhee. Harry was suddenly in full Centurion armor and charging the dummies. He moved like liquid gold as he dodged and deflected curses while laying down a double barrage of his own. The dummies had been programmed by wizards on how to respond to attacks. They had no program designed for an attack like this. Harry was on them in seconds, and you didn't need a stopwatch to know the fight was over only a couple of heartbeats later. His shield knocked the dummy's wand arm away as the knife he now held in that hand did the real damage. As the shield did its job, Harry's knife slashed across the dummy's torso before a blasting curse sent it spinning backward. If anything, it got off lightly. The other dummy lost its wand arm to the sword that then buried itself into the artificial torso of its opponent. A banishing charm saw dummy number 2 then fly across the room along with the first one, leaving both lying in a tangled heap. Harry stood panting, though more with adrenaline rush than effort, as the other four watched, while only the ticking of Bill's forgotten stopwatch broke the stunned silence. It was predictably Padma who had something to say. Wow, Harry, McPhee doesn't know how lucky he was that Hogwarts threw him out the room and not you. That was scary to watch from here. I never want to be on the other end of it. Thanks, Padma. I felt as if I'd been ignoring the goblin part of me for too long. That's how I would fight against goblins or wizards. What do you think, Cursebreaker? The words were out before Bill had time to think of what he was saying. I reckon any wizard seeing you charging like that would shit themselves. It was only the giggling coming from his other 3 students that alerted him he'd said something inappropriate. I also think we might need new training dummies we might need to put armor on if you're going to attack like that. Really devastating attack, Harry, and no webbing. I learned my lesson with Master Sharpshard. Put your opponent out of the fight so they can't attack you again. Bill didn't know if a reparo would actually work on the dummies, so had them on shield drills for the remainder of the lesson. He asked Harry for a quiet word, after escorting them to the great hall for lunch. Ducking outside for a moment provided the privacy they needed. Bill didn't waste time and got right to the heart of the matter. My father is determined to invite Ginny to this ball. He thinks her sitting at your table would be a father making a daughter's dream come true. I wanted to check that you were okay with this arrangement. This drew a frown from Harry. When we suggested 3 tickets for the Weasley family, we assumed you would be the third guest. This was actually an embarrassing situation his father had placed Bill in and didn't bode well for future wizard/goblin negotiations. My father had no sisters, and then 6 sons before Ginny was born. He dotes on her. It's actually killing him waiting on Fudge, making his goblin announcement to the Wisengamot, so he can tell Ginny she's invited to the ball. This left Harry shaking his head as another potential problem raised its head. You do know we are all going to the nation's tailors and having our clothes made for the ball. There will be 5 girls sitting there in a certain style of dress, and your sister will be the odd one out. If she wears the same as the rest of us, it could be construed as the ministry already bending over backwards to please the goblins. It is well known Susan is already part of our group and will be on holiday with us, so her dress like us won't matter. Ginny is a totally different case, since her father will be the ministry's direct link to the nation. Harry thought hard for a minute before answering. I have no objection to your sister being there, though not at the expense of even one vote being changed against us. I think you'll need to run this past my father. I will happily abide with what he decides. The senior Weasley was supposed to be the ministry's leading expert on muggles. It would seem he had a bit to go to get his head around goblins. It would be interesting to hear Dan and Emma's opinion of the man after meeting him at the ball. Fudge had judged his moment perfectly. Half the Wisengamot were almost asleep, and the other half couldn't wait for this session to finish so they could get back to their own lives. As Dumbledore asked if there was any other business, the minister stood before the old fool could bring his hammer down. Excuse me, Chief Warlock. I have a matter to bring before the members. It concerns the ministry's summer ball, an event that has all of Europe talking and scrambling for tickets. This drew a few laughs. Johnny Foreigner wanting to attend their event and not being able to get tickets was considered the way things should be by most of this body. This is easily the premier event on this year's social calendar, and one that I know we're all looking forward to. Why I'm standing before you today is to inform this body that the event nearly never took place. He now had everyone's complete attention, so Cornelius pressed on with his presentation. A brave young man will become this country's youngest ever recipient of an Order of Merlin, first class. Now, through no fault of his, if anyone at the ministry wants to officially contact young Harry, our own laws state it must be done through the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures. Labeling young Harry as a creature is not something I can stand here and support. That is why I am proposing legislative changes for this House to consider. This created a right hullabaloo, with Cornelius and Amelia the only calm people in the chamber. Even Albus had worked himself into a state, though that was more likely to be because he didn't know any of this beforehand. The minister knew they would all be running scenarios through their heads, attempting to second-guess what he was up to. His hope was that, when he provided details of his proposal, they would see it was nowhere near as bad as they were now considering. When the first challenge came, Cornelius was disappointed. He now owed Amelia 5 galleons, as she had predicted correctly. Hem, excuse me, Minister. Surely you don't expect the Department of International Magical Cooperation to now incorporate our liaisons with goblins? No, Madam Umbridge, I was suggesting no such thing. That raises a very interesting point, though. Both members of the Crouch family only received justice because young Harry passed information to Madam Bones through her niece, who's a friend of Harry's at Hogwarts. That department now has a new head because of that information. It also highlights a need for a more direct channel to a nation that every single person in this chamber, with the exception of Albus Dumbledore, does business with. This actually generated some sniggers in the chamber and broadcast to everyone just how far Dumbledore's star had waned when he was a figure of ridicule for the minister to have a pop at. It was time for Cornelius to reveal his plan to the chamber. We currently have a department that deals exclusively with muggles, mainly the misuse of their artifacts. My proposal would see that department tasked to take on our relationship with the Goblin Nation, and its current head promoted to handle all the ministry's dealings with both. As many of you will already know, Arthur's oldest son is currently employed by Gringotts as a curse breaker and as a personal tutor to young Harry. That last morsel was indeed news to many, though welcome news. Through this very fortuitous link, a preliminary inquiry allows me to stand before this chamber with the complete proposal you'll hear today. While the ministry would be represented by Arthur Weasley, the Goblin Nation have proposed Senior Accounts Manager Barchoke to be their ambassador to the ministry. This chamber may know him better as the goblin young Harry calls father. This was a bombshell that silenced the chamber. If they rejected this proposal, they would effectively be rejecting the boy who lived's father. Umbridge came back for more. Hem, excuse me again, Minister. Just what powers will this new department have? Madam Umbridge, I'm surprised at you. This proposal is not about granting any one person or department the ability to make sweeping changes. Have you forgotten that only this chamber has the power to make any alterations to our laws? The new department will be tasked with opening a dialogue between ourselves and others. If, in the course of time, this dialogue leads to any proposed changes in those laws, it will then be debated and voted on in this chamber. I believe Barchoke is also considering having William Weasley as his assistant, hoping this will help avoid any issues of protocol from delaying this project becoming a working entity. This drew nods of agreement all around the chamber. Two purebloods should be more than able to keep a goblin in line. Wasn't even as if the ministry would be granting them a great boon. Classing goblins the same as muggles wasn't much of a step up. If it meant they had a way to intervene when Gringotts threatened to close another pureblood's vault, it would be well worth the goblin's meager gain in status. Dolores just couldn't leave it alone, though. She was like a dog with a bone it didn't want to be parted from. Minister, are you aware the boy in question declared publicly that he wouldn't be sitting his OWLs? Cornelius had been prepared for this, and understood he had to kill this story stone dead. I am aware of Harry's declaration, and the circumstances surrounding why he made it. I have spoken to Harry on many occasions, and Madams Bones and Longbottom will be holidaying with him over the summer. I'm sure I can speak for all three of us, and say we are of the opinion that he is a fine young man. We are also aware how he reacts to attempts to manipulate him, especially by Headmaster Dumbledore. We have 4 years yet before he needs to make the final decision on that subject, and we all know a lot can change in 4 years. Here was the minister's clearest indication that Dumbledore was on his way out. The entire Wisengamot had witnessed the boy's reaction to Dumbledore in this very chamber, so it was Cornelius who was being believed here, despite Albus' strong protest. The minister still had the floor and finished his presentation. The normal period for proposed legislation like this to sit before this chamber is 40 days. I do not want to face the accusation of rushing this through the chamber, so I am proposing we defer voting on this until the 3rd of August. Amelia immediately seconded that proposal, and with no one willing to publicly put their name to an objection, the proposal was passed. Albus still sat in his seat, even although the chamber had now emptied. He was supposed to be the great manipulator, but Cornelius Fudge had just ran rings around him in a chamber he previously owned. The old wizard, though, was grudgingly forced to admit this was a work of sheer genius, even down to the date of the vote. Instead of allowing extra time for members to organize their debate, Cornelius had craftily scheduled the vote to be right after the ball. People would enjoy themselves that Friday night, then come to this chamber Monday morning to vote. He had attempted to get William Weasley to work for him, and been vigorously rebuffed at every turn. Yet Cornelius not only managed it, the minister apparently had Barchoke on side too. Scholarships, Order of Merlin Ball, and an ambassador, everyone walking away from the table thinking they got what they wanted. Albus found himself tipping his hat to Cornelius and Amelia as the pair made their way back into the chamber and headed toward him. Very well played, Cornelius. Very well played indeed. We're not there yet, Albus, and you're forcing me to do something I really don't want to. This is a very prestigious event, an event that I can't have anyone upsetting the guest of honor over the course of the evening. You have proven time and time again that you cannot leave young Harry in peace. Therefore, I can't take the chance of you being there. Sorry, Albus, but you are barred from the ministry ball. He really only had one question. Did Harry or his father ask you to do this? No, they know nothing about this. The two of you in the same room is too much temptation for you not to interfere. It was my decision not to allow that to happen. Both walked away and left Albus sitting there a broken man. Albus was actually trying to decide if he could bring himself to play the last card he held, giving up Severus to Barchoke. The goblin's comment about seeking him out on Harry's birthday now made perfect sense. Barchoke fully expected Albus to be at the ball. For Albus not to attend would send signals around Britain, and even Europe, that his days in a position of power were numbered. Whatever decision he made about Severus was now pushed a couple of weeks closer by this. He would need that time to convince Barchoke and Harry that he should be invited to the ball. Ooh, they left their history exam arm in arm. Hermione stretched up and kissed Harry on the cheek before resting her head on his shoulder as they walked. Why, thank you, miss, and pray tell what I did to receive such an honor. I want to make sure I repeat it often. Hermione couldn't help but laugh at the playfulness of her boyfriend. The pressure was now off all of them. Our last exam, Harry, they're all over. Normally I would be worrying myself sick by this point, going over every paper in my head and working out how many points I had dropped. Now I've got you, we've got friends, and a whole summer to look forward to. The first 10 days jumping between all our homes and getting prepared for the ball, then we're off on a worldwide adventure. I've never been this happy that school is ending. In fact, I've never been this happy. This earned Hermione a return kiss on the cheek before Padma interrupted. It's too nice a day to sit inside. Let's grab some food from the hall and eat it down by the lake. This proved to be such a popular idea that most of first year ended up down by the water. The summer holidays were just around the corner. And thanks for reading. And too, it's official. Britain has just had its second wettest year since records began. As a cyclist, I didn't need people with PhDs and supercomputers to tell me that. It started raining at the end of March and still hasn't stopped. Evening classes in Arc Building are proving rather popular. 33. First Class Ball. Harry Crow disclaimer. When carrying out DIY, it isn't always about saving money. To me, being able to stand back and say, I did that, is equally as important. That is why the first person to click on this chapter is also the first person, other than me, to read it. I realize this might not be everyone's cup of tea and can only suggest they get the professionals in. I can heartily recommend J.K. Rowling's early works. She really makes the character of Harry Potter her own. Chapter 33. Albus sat at the leaving feast and couldn't remember when he'd experienced a worst year at Hogwarts. The reason for his personal annus horribilis was sitting at the Ravenclaw table, along with 2 Gryffindors and a couple of Hufflepuffs. While they had remained at their own tables, as Slytherin were awarded the house and Quidditch cups, the 4 first years had moved toward Ravenclaw as soon as the feast commenced. He'd since learned that this group would not only be holidaying together, they were attending the ministry ball as Harry's guests. Harry would have muggles, a goblin, a Veela, and a wizarding family from India as guests at his table. This was certainly a provocative mixture, yet Albus Dumbledore was the one barred from attending. Unlike Cinderella, Albus didn't need a fairy godmother, being perfectly capable of transfiguring his own horse and carriage. Glass slippers or a suitable wardrobe wouldn't cause him any trouble either. His problem was that, while Cinderella had an invitation to the ball, Albus Dumbledore didn't. An even bigger shock to Albus, though, was the reactions of both Weasley parents at his visit to their home. After reading of Arthur's potential new position at the ministry, Albus had thought this would give him an in to what was happening with the goblins, and more importantly, Harry. To say he'd been given short shrift at the Burrow was putting it mildly. Marley had delivered a personal howler from as close as her rather large bosom, and their height discrepancies allowed. Albus was hoping everyone had forgotten the Quirrell incident. Arthur then took over the hazing from his wife, before practically throwing him out of the Burrow, apparently endangering 4 of their children, and then attempting to blackmail their eldest son, was not appreciated by the Weasley family. Barchoke's deadline of Harry's birthday also caused scheduling problems, since the goblin was going to be out the country for most of the summer, and their meeting at the ball was now no longer an option. Albus was left with no choice but to pass a message to Barchoke through Sirius. At least the answer took some pressure off. The goblin was prepared to wait until the beginning of next term, giving Albus the entire summer to make up his mind. Albus was still torn, though. He badly needed an opening to get closer to the boy, as every other door he'd tried had been slammed in his face. With the celebratory ball causing a stir and the proposed new goblin initiative, he couldn't see any way Severus could survive being outed as the person who gave Voldemort the prophecy, leading directly to the Potters being murdered. His potions professor would draw scant comfort from the great hall being bedecked in green and silver if this was his last summer as a free man. Hogwarts deputy, though, held polar opposite views to those of the headmaster. Apart from Slytherin House winning both trophies, Minerva thought this had been a stellar year. Her tough stance on discipline may have seen quite a number of students on probation, but it improved all the students' general behavior by a noticeable amount. With a line drawn and the consequences for crossing it known, Hogwarts had purred along nicely since Christmas. You then had to factor in the new history curriculum and its professor, plus completely changing the way Transfiguration was being taught to first year. It was also hard to dismiss the impact Harry's private tutors were having on the school. Bill Weasley was not only teaching most of first year, his revision classes for students facing OWL and NEWT had been very well attended. The Weasley twins had actually come to Minerva with Master Pitsley's opinion that they would be beyond OWL level by next summer and could sit their exams a year early if they wished. Both had actually confided in their head of house that Harry was well ahead of them. Minerva noticed that it wasn't just Slytherin who were celebrating. It looked like the group of mixed first years sitting at the Ravenclaw table were ready to party too, and their good cheer was spreading to the rest of the hall. Albus may be disappointed that Harry Potter didn't come to Hogwarts, but Minerva thought Harry Crow had been the conduit through which all the positive changes had flowed. Minerva couldn't help but smile at the thought she would be seeing this group over the summer, not only at the ball, but when they met to shop with the Potter Scholarship students. The woman with the reputation for being the strictest person in Hogwarts had probably smiled more this year than any other since she started teaching here. Ooh, there weren't too many smiles at King's Cross after the express arrived. That wasn't strictly true, though. Emma, Dan, and Sirius all thought it was funny the way Hermione and Harry were holding on to each other, as if they would never see the other again. Gone was Harry's stoic public face, and Hermione actually had tears in her eyes at the thought of being parted. After a couple of minutes of this, Emma leaned towards Sirius. Dan and I are actually working next week. We finish up for the holidays on Friday. How about we take them both home with us for the weekend, and then Harry can use his portkey on Monday morning? The alternative would be these two mopping around their houses. Poor Idge would end up knackered carrying their letters back and forth. I think that's a great idea. I'll let his father know to expect them Monday morning. Would it be okay if they spent a couple of days at my house? Henrika's going to be very busy at Gringotts for the first half of the holidays. Dan was trying to appear miffed at this arrangement and failing miserably. Emma made no attempt to hide her excitement at having them home, though she could still tease the man who had quickly become a good friend to both her and Dan. You have a library, Sirius. We may never see them again. Just go, and we'll see how long these two take to notice you've left. Harry's goblin upbringing was telling him this was totally irrational, but it didn't help one bit. He also knew they were meeting up next weekend to get their outfits for the ball. That just made him feel worse. His head told him he'd be fine, but Harry's heart was screaming it couldn't last a week without Hermione's hugs. She got him addicted since the first day they met. It was an addiction he had no intention of fighting. That Hermione apparently felt exactly the same was the reason they were still standing on the platform, long after everyone else had left. He didn't know how long they had been standing there, but it was now quiet, a state that couldn't exist when Sirius was around. Harry removed that hair he loved so much from his eyes to see a pair of parents smirking at him. With no sign of his godfather anywhere, he was forced to ask the obvious question. Do you know where Sirius is? This got his girlfriend's attention. She recognized the smirks on her parents' faces at once. They were up to something. Dan didn't keep them waiting. Oh, he got fed up waiting on you two to let go of each other. Your godfather left ages ago. I suppose that means we've got a lodger for the weekend. but only if you take Hermione with you to Gringotts on Monday. Dan was soon experiencing his own personal patented Hermione hug. He wasn't sure if it was her sword fencing or all the practice his daughter was getting with hugging Harry, but Hermione could now make his ribs creak with the ferocity of her embrace. She quickly moved on to her mother, any thoughts of the Blues banished now that Harry was coming home with them. The boy in question had a mad grin on his face and finally remembered to answer Dan. That would be bloody fantastic. Lucius had watched all this from the shadows, still hoping for a break. He'd easily discovered where the Pattles lived. The information proved useless, though. In the middle of a moonless night, he'd attempted to get close to the house, purely on a fact-finding mission. The arm that Voldemort branded all those years ago was burning as if it was going to burst into flames. This was before he could get anywhere near the house, too. Lucius was forced to get out of there fast, just in case his mere presence had triggered an alarm. If the Pattle home had wards like that, Lucius was glad he didn't know the Mudblood's address. This little bint was already the one person who possessed the power to completely destroy this boy. Unfortunately, she would also be the best protected. Even slipping her the book in Diagon Alley wouldn't help. The wards around her house would probably fry Tom's diary the instant she returned home. With the Paddles being equally protected, this left the head of the Malfoy family with a bit of a dilemma. Did he pass the book off to some nonentity, like that Chinese witch, or even blood traitor Weasley's daughter, or did he wait until the last minute and take an attempt at a bigger prize? He knew they would all be here come 11 o'clock on the 1st of September. A packed platform should provide the cover for him to slip the slim volume into an unsuspecting pocket. Lucius understood this would be a massive risk, leaving everything to the very last moment. He also acknowledged there would need to be a large slice of luck involved too for him to achieve the result he wanted. Lucius could console himself with the though that, if he couldn't get anyone close to the boy, he could still ensure the diary made its way home to Hogwarts in some poor, unsuspecting child's pocket. Uo Harry was trying to be there for his friend as they both made their way along the St. Mungo's corridor. It was as if Neville was experiencing every emotion humanly possible with each step that took him nearer to his parents' room. There was joy, yet tinged with sadness, excitement flavored with trepidation. This was clearly something he looked forward to, but at the same time dreaded. Harry, just don't expect too much. Neville, I'm going to meet my godmother and your dad. That's more than enough for me. Augusta walked behind them both, not having words to express how proud she was of her grandson. He had changed beyond all recognition from the timid little boy she'd practically had to force onto the Hogwarts Express last September, and Augusta knew who was responsible for this dramatic transformation: his friends. The way they had set this summer's holiday itinerary, it was 1 week busy, followed by 7 days of rest. Because of her age, Augusta had no wish to hold the youngsters back. She gave the first week in Florida a miss, joining them in the Turkish villa beside the Black Sea. There she spent one of the best weeks of her life, listening to her grandson try to explain this whole other world they'd visited in Florida. She also watched him like a hawk, delighted with what her old eyes were seeing. The group of four were even closer than she remembered, with Padma and Neville always being together. The affection they had for each other was clearly visible, giving his grandmother hope she might actually see him settled with a good wife and family before her time came to leave this world behind. The Longbottoms were purebloods and proud of their heritage. The family didn't let that fact define them, though. She would be ecstatic if her grandson decided on either of these girls. She had spent the week in the very good company of the Grangers, with Barchuk and Sirius dividing the week between them. Both had business in Gringotts to occupy the rest of their time. Watching this loving couple care for the children made a nonsense of all that pureblood dogma, and the academic results from Hogwarts bore this out. Minerva had confided in her that Neville was not only the top first-year student in Gryffindor, he placed 7th overall amongst all his peers. Augusta expected that his 3 Ravenclaw friends finished higher, and was fine with that. That there were 9 Ravenclaws in first year meant her grandson had outperformed at least 3 of the cleverest house. That was totally unexpected, and a phenomenal achievement on his part. When the youngsters had tired themselves out with swimming and games through the day, the adults then got to spend quiet evenings sipping drinks and enjoying each other's company. Each were fascinated by the others, and the subjects discussed were wide and varied. Neville had talked with her about the offer of help for Frank and Alice. Augusta was more than willing to listen. Watching them for the last 10 years had left her ready to talk to the devil himself if it offered the slighted glimpse of hope. Barchuk had arrived with some goblin ale for the youngsters earlier that day, and it was this he was drinking as the four sat watching the sun go down. It was time for the serious conversation. Augusta, the last thing I want to do here is raise any false hopes for you or Neville. Our experience has taught us that there are no absolutes when dealing with victims of this curse, and that no two victims react the same to the treatment. I have to be honest here and say that sometimes there is no reaction at all, and we have never attempted this treatment on victims after such an extended period since their exposure. Dan asked for an explanation of the treatment and what it hoped to achieve. This curse is a vicious thing, Dan, the most disgusting curse ever invented. While the Avada Kedavra kills its victims, it is instantaneous and therefore relatively painless. The Cruciatus curse triggers every nerve ending in your body to send messages of great pain to your brain. As dentists, Dan and Emma were used to dealing with people in pain. Neither could wrap their heads around a body coping with that much agony. The wizarding theory is that a body can only stand so much pain before reverting to madness. Forgive me, ladies, but we goblins think that is a pile of dragon shit. One of the differences between goblins and wizards is that we question everything and anything, and are constantly trying to find better answers to most problems. Goblin pride was also at stake here. The very thought of a pain so terrible that it would drive us into this madness was repugnant to our nation. A lot of research was done to discover that Mother Nature is indeed wondrous. Barchok certainly had the other three's attention, but he was no healer. He offered the explanation that had made sense to him. The treatment is purely potions-based. Not possessing the specialized knowledge of how they work on the mind, this is how I understand it. Living underground, fire is essential. It can also be a dangerous thing. A fire breaking out is usually a minor matter, easily dealt with. Should one happen when we're sleeping, taking hold before it can be brought under control, we have stringent evacuation procedures and choke points where the fire can be contained from spreading. We have discovered our bodies react in a similar fashion, closing down routes to the brain in an attempt to keep itself alive. He could see they were following his explanation, so continued. The fact that a patient is still alive shows the body was successful in this most basic function, though we have no way of measuring the damage done. Our treatment is like the cleanup crews who move in after the fire has burned itself out, repairing the damage and rebuilding, making that section habitable once more. As you can imagine, no two fires are ever the same, and sometimes it takes years for a section to recover. Emma and I are well aware of the measures the body can take to protect itself, though neither of us could be considered experts on the subject. What we could offer is a way to assess the damage and measure any progress. There are private clinics with machines that can measure brain activity and perform scans inside your head. Watching the reaction to her husband's revelations, Emma felt she needed to clarify something. These procedures are entirely non-invasive and totally pain-free. Sometimes an indicator dye will be injected into an arm to provide better images, but that's the only thing that may be required. Mostly the patient undergoing these tests just lay on a bed. We could look into getting a full range of tests done before any treatment. Those same tests carried out, say, 6 months later, would provide proof of what effect your treatment was having. This was something Barchok was not expecting, and immediately the goblin asked Dan if he could get more information on these procedures for their healers. Barchok then turned his attention back to Augusta. In a small number of cases, this treatment has brought about a complete reversal of the damage caused. I think we have to be realistic and say that is probably unlikely when dealing with patients who suffered this curse so long ago. Sadly, there are those that show no improvement. We can only hope they don't fall into this category. Between these extremes lie different degrees of recovery that are as wide as the sea currently in front of us. Would a mother recognizing her son, or a son recognizing his mother, be considered a success? Only you and Neville could really answer that. Augusta had been glad of the glass of port in her hand that evening. It helped her distill the entire problem down to one question. Did she trust these people? With that question instantly answered, the rest was easy. The Grangers had made some calls, and Sirius had picked up the brochures that had been delivered to their home. Augusta hadn't been able to make head nor tail of these glossy colored pages, but everything looked safe. Barchok admitted the copies Sirius had dropped off at Gringotts had left their healers drooling at the possibilities this would provide. At the end of their week, Augusta had parted company with the group. They were heading off to Rome, where the rest of the Patel family would be joining them for a week of sightseeing. She had been busy making arrangements of her own, arrangements that would come into play today. They had the ministry ball tomorrow, and then the entire group was heading off to spend a nice, quiet, and restful week in the Maldives. Though with their numbers swelling to 17, Augusta questioned how quiet it might be. She entered the room to find precisely what she expected, her son and his wife in exactly the same condition as they had been for the last decade. This state of affairs was no longer acceptable to the acting head of the Longbottom family, not now that she knew there were possible alternatives. St. Mungo's were about to discover that Augusta's reputation as a formidable witch was well earned, and she was about to add some new chapters to that reputation today. The portkey had barely deposited the father and son to the Granger's back garden when Harry was running for the door. The way he was feeling, only one thing would help. Hermione was waiting with open arms, and soon both were wrapped in a needed hug. How did it go? Barchok took a moment to watch the distress flowing out of his son before answering. Augusta said it went exactly as planned. Frank and Alice are traveling by private ambulance to the clinic. After some tests, they'll spend the night there before more tests tomorrow, and then heading back to London. Those nurses Augusta found will stay with them on rotating shifts, and then, after returning to the city, portkey with Neville's parents into Gringotts. Neville appeared every bit as upset as Harry. He could have done with Padma there too. Just being in his girlfriend's arms had calmed Harry enough that he could answer. She'll be there tonight for Neville's birthday. Padma's like Hermione and seems to know instinctively what to do. I've not been here 5 minutes, but already I'm feeling better. He gave his girlfriend a kiss on the cheek in thanks before continuing. It's easy to see why the Sorting Hat couldn't put Neville anywhere else but Gryffindor. Walking down that corridor when you know what's waiting at the other end takes real courage. We have to help them, Father, whatever it takes. We will, son. Everything we possibly can will be done. These tests will also tell us if the Muggle doctors have any way of treating this. Our healers were very impressed that these facilities existed far less could be used on anyone. Emma was now busy fussing over Harry and making sure he was feeling better. It was Dan who followed up on that. Our doctors are always striving to increase their knowledge of how our brains work. They may be able to offer some form of help. We find it strange, but refreshing that your healers are so willing to share information between each other. It must make things so much easier. We have dentistry publications that are periodically delivered to our practice, as do most dentists in Britain. They not only keep us up to date with any new developments in procedures and technology, they have information on anything interesting that's happening in dentistry anywhere in the world. For at least 150 years, the Lancet has been providing the same function for doctors the world over. Shared information in that publication has led to more than a few medical breakthroughs. The more time Barchok spent with these people, the more he found his views on the world changing. Seeing Harry was back to himself with Hermione at his side reminded Barchok there was another matter he wanted to discuss with the Grangers. It would require the use of their memory viewer, though. Only Barchok had seen this before and could understand the shock, fear, and anger that he found himself surrounded by. The memory ended as Harry approached the stricken Hermione, and her golden protection dissolved back into her bracelet. Harry and Hermione were of course in each other's arms, but Emma had them both in an embrace, and she didn't appear ready for letting go any time soon. Dan was very angry that Hermione had been hurt, but incredibly moved at the way Harry had fought like a demon to avenge her. He got to know Barchok, though, and understood they hadn't just watched this as a means of entertainment. I have to assume you had a reason for terrifying the life out of us with that. This drew a wry smile from the goblin. I think it's fair to say that Hermione's safety is a very high priority for everyone sitting here. and is the reason for you watching my memory of that morning. Your daughter's safety was such a high priority. Her bracelet has more protection runes than any piece of jewelry ever worn by a witch or wizard. Our problem is, it shouldn't have been able to protect her like that. This has never happened before. Emma was puzzled at this. Harry's do it all the time. Isn't this a good thing? As a centurion, Harry's are specifically designed to do that. They are also bound to him by blood and will never come off. We are still trying to determine how his magic allows the armor to increase his speed and strength when Hermione gave us a whole new problem. Her bracelet expanding to become body armor is not a good thing. It's a great thing, but only if she can repeat it. His daughter having the ability to suddenly be protected by armor was a bloody brilliant thing in Dan Granger's book too. How do we go about achieving that? We want to blood-bond the bracelet to Hermione and see if that works. The director has promised to consider using the Centurion enchantments on it, if need be. Tomorrow will thrust Harry even more into the spotlight, and we all know who will be right by his side. As a friend of the Goblin Nation, we intend to do everything in our power to offer Hermione protection. Both parents immediately wanted to know what this blood bond entailed, and any side effects. She merely has to prick a finger and rub her blood into the discs containing runes. Then I need to perform some enchantments. The only downside for Hermione is that the bracelet will never leave her wrist after that. Dan realized this would mean his daughter walking around for the rest of her life, wearing Hermione, best friends forever on her wrist. He also realized that the world Hermione had entered could be a dangerous place. He considered the slim possibility that these two wouldn't remain best friends, leaving Hermione with this constant reminder of that fact, a small price to pay for the protection this would afford his daughter. He glanced toward Emma to see his wife already nodding her consent. Barchoke returned his attention to the youngsters. This is going to take some work, Hermione, but you'll have Harry to help. I also think this should be kept a secret, and hope you never need it. If we keep it to the group who know about Harry being able to cast with his sword, that should allow you to practice without alerting anyone. You'll probably need to wait until you return to Hogwarts, though. You have other friends with you for the rest of the holidays. Hermione had a question that was worrying her. That shield formed over my clothes. Will it form under them if my bracelet is blood-bound? This is so unusual that all I can do is offer my best guess, which would be yes. This drew a blush from the young witch. Harry might not have a problem with displaying his chest. Hermione had no intention of letting that happen to her. At least not for a few years anyway, and then only when she and Harry were ready for that. Ooh-oh, despite Harry's repeated protests that it was Neville's special day, those protests were ignored, especially by Neville, and the party at Longbottom Manor was held for both birthday boys. Neville managed to turn Harry's opinion around halfway through the evening when he confessed this was already his best birthday party ever. It was a group in very good spirits who were gathered in the anteroom at the ministry, waiting on tonight's events getting started. As the guests of honor, they would only enter the ballroom after everyone else was seated. An aide then informed them that the minister had just taken his seat. It was time to go. Arthur Weasley brought up the rear of the procession, with Marley on one arm and a wide-eyed Ginny on the other. Ginny was dressed in the finest robes she'd ever owned, yet still didn't fit in. She was here, though, which was more than any of her brothers had managed. She didn't really need to console herself, just being here tonight was magical. She was drawn out of her dreaming by a loud fanfare of trumpets. "What's that, Daddy?" "Oh, that will be Harry." "Oh, wow, he can play the trumpet too." Molly's harumph was ignored, just like her husband had ignored her opinion on tonight. With Bill no longer having to spend his weekends at Hogwarts, he had switched to spending that time in the Burrow. He was still teaching, though, trying to prepare them for what they would face tonight. Three things very quickly became apparent to Marley. This was a really big night for the Weasley family. They were woefully underprepared, and they'd be leaving the biggest asset the family possessed sitting at home. Arthur had ignored her advice to take Bill, instead plumping for giving his beloved daughter the best early birthday present he possibly could. Tonight could make or break them. The Weasleys were the ministry's representatives at this table. Instead of having an expert on goblins, Bill probably knew more about muggles than his father, too. They had an out-of-her-depth, starstruck, soon-to-be 11-year-old little girl. Her husband obviously hoped this would be a foot in the door for Ginny, trying to avoid another situation like Ron at Hogwarts. Marley couldn't fault him for that, but already knew this attempt was doomed to failure. These were very nice kids, but they were talking about a party they attended last night, shopping in Rome, and all were looking forward to going on holiday together soon after tonight's ball. What was Ginny supposed to talk about with them? The swimming hole is quite muddy, but the apples needed the rain is hardly going to be riveting conversation. After Ginny attends Hogwarts, they would all have some common ground to chat about, but tonight was a mistake. Marley had begun to wonder if the goblins weren't a lot cleverer than they were being given credit for. It was assumed that Bill becoming Barchoke's assistant was to save the goblins making silly mistakes. Marley now, though her son's real job would be to stop Arthur putting his foot in his mouth. If tonight backfired on them, Marley silently swore that Arthur would be sleeping in that bloody shed of his until at least Christmas. Hermione was on Harry's arm as he led their procession into the ballroom. She sparkled at his side, literally. The Goblin tailors had recognized their work would be featured in the wizarding press all over Europe, so only their very best would do. They would be pleased to know the photographers were practically fighting with each other to capture images of their fine work. They had chosen pastel colors as the basis for their designs, with Hermione's being pale green. The goblins had taken the designs handed to them and applied their own stamp, though. Hermione's dress was high at the neck, with the bodice delicately embroidered, and deep green semi-precious stones reflecting any available light. All the other dresses had sashes around the waists, ending in bows at the back, but hers had a wide and bejeweled dark green belt, from which her sword hung in its sheath. The dress was almost to the floor, and the puffed shoulder sleeves were covered by an embroidered shawl that appeared to have gold thread running through the green material. Add in the jewelry from Barchoke and Hermione was a showstopper. The Goblin tailors had achieved that most difficult of tasks. Instead of attempting to dress young girls as women, their designs merely hinted at the beautiful women these young witches would one day become. Harry's waistcoat matched the shade of his date's dress perfectly, while his frock coat was dark green to match Hermione's accents. Of course, the young couple sported matching swords too. Dan, Emma and Barchoke followed their children into the ballroom. Dan thought his wife was the most beautiful woman at the ball, as her cream dress highlighted the tan this year's holiday had provided. Unlike the girls' dresses, Emma's was a more traditional look for this period. The bodice, while lower, was adorned with pearls, and her dark brown shawl and sash matched the shade of Dan's frock coat perfectly. That Emma was the most beautiful lady present was not a view shared by everyone, as they were followed by Sirius and a simply stunning Henrika. Like each couple, the goblins had designed clothes for Sirius' dusky pink waistcoat matched his date's dress perfectly, and the dark maroon frock coat complemented those highlight colors. Sirius had Minerva on his other arm, but all the attention was elsewhere. Photographers that had been almost fighting over Harry and Hermione nearly started a riot trying to get closer to Henrika. Neville came next, with Padma on one arm and his gran on the other. As all the elder witches had done, Augusta had chosen to wear what she normally would to an occasion like this. She thought her grandson looked incredibly handsome in his chosen clothes, though. They in turn were followed by the other three Patels. While Parvati was dressed in the same style as the other young witches in their party, Smeeta and Ramrao had chosen more traditional Indian wear. Amelia was behind this riot of color, though Susan and Hannah were almost as bright as they too shone in their goblin-made dresses. The Weasleys brought up the rear as the special guests were escorted to their table. There was a small band stage in front of the guest of honor's table, and it was to this stage that the minister soon made his way. Harry's table was front and center, with the nearest surrounding tables populated by ministry officials, and those willing to pay the asking price for getting close to the boy who lived. Cornelius cleared his throat before beginning his prepared speech. Good evening, everyone. It gives me great pleasure to greet you all at this very special event. Our guest of honor made a couple of requests regarding tonight, requests I was delighted to comply with. First, young Harry asked if some of the formality could be removed from this evening, as it's his birthday. How could I say no? This drew some laughter, cheering, and a good few shouts of happy birthday. Cornelius wasn't lying. He was just being a politician and stretching the truth. Harry had asked that he be awarded his medal as just that, Harry, hence losing the formalities. There was also a request made that we do the presentation before dinner, getting the speeches out the way and allowing everyone to enjoy their evening. Yes, a request had been made, but the minister had no intention of saying the request came from him. With the presentation done, his hope was that the press would stay for the free food, perhaps the first dance, and then bugger off. Cornelius was well aware of the undercurrent of animosity that was presently flowing amongst some sections of their society. One glance at Harry's table was enough to know that here would be the lightning rod for those animosities, especially as the night progresses and the drink flowed. The minister wanted the press long gone before any incidents presented themselves. It was Halloween 1981 when the Dark Lord visited Godric's Hollow. Tonight is about this country acknowledging the debt that we owe the Potter family for their bravery and selfless sacrifice. The ministry wanted a way to express their gratitude, and from this, the James and Lily Potter scholarships were born. A panel consisting of Madam Bones, Professor McGonagall, and Harry's godfather, Lord Black, were convened and tasked with administering this scholarship. In September, a young first-generation wizard and a pureblood witch, who tragically lost her mother in an accident, will be the first recipients of this scholarship. Young Harry, though, is taking his involvement even further. He and his friends intend to meet these recipients in Diagon Alley and make sure their transition into Hogwarts students is as painless as it can possibly be. This was met with loud applause. Helping children through Hogwarts was not something that anyone could really publicly oppose. We are now at the portion of the evening that everyone is here for. Rather than me standing here and talking about the boy who lived, I think we would all rather see Harry receive his Order of Merlin, first class, and then hear from him. Harry rose with the applause and purposely walked toward the minister. He'd gone over this speech with his father and Hermione and was as ready as he would ever be. While wizarding speeches appeared to be long and flowery, goblins tended to be more direct and leave less room for misinterpretation. Kill the bastard before he guts you might be appropriate, but would hardly go down well tonight. The minister pinned Harry's medal onto his coat as his table led the loud cheering that followed. He was then invited forward to say a few words, and an expectant hush fell over the ballroom. I would like to thank the minister and his ministry for this prestigious award. I hope you will all forgive me if I say that the honor tonight's event is bestowing on my mum and dad means so much more to me. Yes, they gave their lives fighting a great evil, as did a lot of witches and wizards who will have relatives and friends sitting here tonight. I see this scholarship as something that honors all those who fell fighting the good fight. This is their honor too, their remembrance. The applause started slow, shocked, and tearful faces were now reflected back at Harry. They had come tonight to see and hear a boy. Instead, they found themselves entranced by this charismatic young man. The applause quickly built, and like a powerful wave, soon engulfed the ballroom. When it died down, Harry began the part of his prepared speech that he knew would be controversial. Yes, my mum and dad died fighting a great evil, but that great evil wasn't Voldemort. Harry used the shock of him saying that dreaded name out loud to remove a small glass vial from his waistcoat pocket. No, Tom Riddle was nothing more than a powerful wizard who used existing prejudices to almost bring this country to its knees. I have here a vial of blood. Can anyone tell me how pure it is? This was greeted by total silence. It felt as if someone had asked the Queen if it was her that just let one rip. Not expecting an answer to his question, Harry continued. My three best friends and I are a pretty strange mixture. A daughter of an ancient Indian pureblood line, the scion of one of Britain's oldest pureblood families, a first-generation witch, and then me, a wizard raised by goblins. Do you think this vial here tells you any of that? Prejudices in 1980, one dictated my mother should be slaughtered like an animal because of her circumstances of birth, yet we are all here tonight honoring her. Harry turned to face a minister who was turning paler by the second. Minister Fudge's courageous stance on this matter should be applauded, and certainly has my full support. It takes a brave man to say this bigotry will no longer be tolerated in Britain. Tonight's awards broadcasts that message out like a welcoming beacon to the rest of the world, as does his recent attempts for a closer relationship with the Goblin Nation. This had the colour returning to the minister, and it got even better as Harry's attention once more shifted to the audience. As you probably know, I've spent most of my life living as a goblin, and I can honestly say I see a lot of similarities between our cultures. My father is a brave and honorable goblin, traits I know both cultures hold dear. He is also a head of family, a head who, just like every other head of family, hopes one day his eldest son will follow in his footsteps. I really could never see myself becoming a banker, but an ambassador is certainly a position worth aspiring to. Harry had made that as plain as he possibly could, and it was now time to finish up. A few days ago, my friends and I were in Rome. We took the time to visit that city's ancient Colosseum. I found it sad that the civilization who built this magnificent structure were wiped out, simply because they couldn't adapt to the changing world around them. The sterling efforts and forward thinking of Minister Fudge's administration should ensure a fate like that will never befall this society, and see our country go from strength to strength. I would like to thank you all for these awards, listening to me, and hope they're serving the food soon. I'm a growing lad, and am really looking forward to dinner. Cornelius led the applause, and shook Harry's hand as the boy returned to his table where they were all on their feet. The boy who lived had just given him and his ministry an endorsement that no amount of gold could buy. He had also cleverly made that support conditional. Providing his ministry stayed in the light, he could count on Harry's support. Since this was the direction he wished to go, that shouldn't be a problem. Cornelius almost shit himself when the boy took out that vial of blood. This was a subject one didn't talk about in polite company. He couldn't think of anyone else who could have pulled it off. All that was needed now was for his vote to pass the Wisengamot on Monday, and Cornelius could relax, for a little while at least. Harry returned to his table to a rapturous reception and a congratulatory kiss from his girlfriend. Marley had listened while Bill talked about this young man, but seeing him in action, so to speak, had practically taken her breath away. He just stared down the pureblood elite of Britain, Europe too, and told them they had been wrong. This was no childish rant, though. He stood there like a warrior and verbally tore their former leader to shreds, before finally outing their pureblood superiority beliefs for the nonsense that they are. She wondered how many of them would enjoy their meal after that, being reminded they were here to honor a muggle-born witch and her goblin son. Something was bothering her, though, so when the table quietened, Marley asked her question. "Harry, I hope you don't mind me asking, but you never actually said who that blood belonged to." She felt the full force of those green eyes and that devilish smile, framed by his long, jet-black hair. Marley suddenly realized this boy had the charm, charisma, and confidence to pull off just about anything. "That was precisely my point, Mrs. Weasley. It didn't matter whose blood it was. Actually, it's not really blood at all. This is fake blood that I bought out of a joke shop in Crawley. It's supposedly edible and strawberry-flavored, if anyone wants to try it." Serious. Dan and Ramrow suddenly had their respective wives and girlfriend pounding between their shoulder blades to alleviate their choking, a consequence of trying to burst into laughter while eating soup. Not sure whether her hearing had suddenly malfunctioned, Marley asked for confirmation. "You faced down this entire crowd using something you bought out of a joke shop." Harry's smile went up another notch in answer, as Arthur suddenly had a horrible premonition of what his new job could entail. "Bill tells us you are friends with Fred and George." "Oh, yes, sir. They're great guys, especially after we came to an understanding that meant no more pranks on us." Of course, that was a story the entire table wanted to hear. It left Marley certain she was right. They had really underestimated the goblins. Arthur thought his wife was correct, too. He wasn't anywhere near prepared for this job. Dolores hadn't been prepared for that speech. At least she wasn't alone in that. It certainly ruined her appetite. She'd been working quietly behind the scenes for the last few weeks, trying to ensure this disgusting goblin proposal was kicked out on Monday. That speech from the boy who lived just destroyed all her endeavors. That wasn't the real reason she was currently stirring her soup, rather than eating it. Glancing over at the top table destroyed any appetite she had. How were you meant to enjoy your food with mudbloods, muggles, and even creatures sitting in the heart of the ministry? Why didn't they just invite a centaur along too and be done with it? She was sure the caterers would have arranged for a bale of hay, save the curtains and upholstery from getting chewed. A house elf could have been ordered to follow the beast around with a shovel, centaur, shit on the ballroom floor would really have made everyone's evening. It was time for dolers to stop amusing and face facts. Unless something was done here tonight that would show this boy for the child that he was, the goblin proposal would sail through the Wisengamot on Monday. It was also looking increasingly likely that she would have to be the one to do it too. Now all dolers needed to figure out was just exactly what it could be. And thanks for reading N2 running a bit late this week, though this is the longest chapter of HC to date. I've also been very busy with a project I could use your help with. I've been working with some 13-14 kids to produce a film against knife crime in Scotland. This is a national competition run by the Scottish government, and we've reached the semi-final stage. Around the beginning of February, the competing videos will go online, and people will be invited to electronically vote for their favorite, sussed where I could use your help yet. We'll post more details when they come into the school.